I was trying to think of a joke or something to start this video, but instead I want to read a quote from the book Tricks of the Windows Game Programming Gurus, written by Andre Lamothe in the late 90s. One of the hardest things about writing video games is designing them. Sure, 3D mathematics is hard, but thinking of a fun game and a design to go along with it is just as difficult in a manner of speaking, and definitely as important. Who cares if you have the latest volumetric photon traces if the game sucks? Today, we're going to take a look at Freestyle MetalX for the PS2. Thank you to everybody who suggested this. I got the first few suggestions for it a long time ago, so it's good to finally get at it. Let's get started. And also apologies in advance if you hear the wind, it's a very windy day. Freestyle MetalX, developed by Debus Studios and published by Midway in 2003, is a tech fantasy FMX game similar to a few other games I've played before. Quite a few members of Debus previously worked on Metalcross Mania in 2000, and it's always good when the developer has roots in the current genre of game. But even more interesting than that, one of the game's artists, one Oscar Ferrero Lopez, went on to become the CEO of Elite 3D. They're an outsourced game art studio that does work for a bunch of different stuff like the various Call of Duty games, Diablo 2, Crash Bandicoot 4, Asphalt 9, and more. It's amazing how closely related so many parts of the game industry are. The career here is everything we've already seen before. Go from map to map completing goals to move on. But there is one major difference between this game and other tech fantasy games. Every single goal is given to you by the exact same girl in a bikini. We can really see the creative juices flowing here. The goals themselves are a lot of stuff we've seen already as well. Get a score, do a trick on a thing, hit an NPC, and other familiar stuff. I never hate this formula because there are plenty of creative ways that it can be manipulated into something better, but I think I should point out that Tony Hawk's Underground came out this exact same year, and that kind of completely reimagined the formula for this kind of game. This game has obvious inspiration from games like Pro Skater 4 and Pro BMX 2. There's still a career-free skate, but maybe don't get into it expecting any kind of story or dialogue or characters or anything. This is an FMX game, so you also have the variety of races to play through, and those are made pretty well. And there are also the freestyle events for every map, like Big Air. So the variety of things to do is pretty solid the entire time. I also greatly appreciate how quickly you're allowed to move on between each map. You can unlock the first 3 maps and a few events, all within the first 30 minutes of gameplay, and there's a lot of game here, so it's good that I can see more of it at a faster pace. If I had to slog through it, I wouldn't be in for it. I've been through enough of those already. The gameplay is surprisingly very similar to Crusty Demons. It's got the obvious quirks of the precursor syndrome, but you can see the ideas that Crusty Demons took away from this. Like the other FMX games, you've got your standard racing game controls: drive, brake, drift, the nitro button, and mid-air leveling. There's also the tech fantasy stuff. Tricks in this game are mapped to circle and triangle with various directions to do different things. To actually do a trick, you first have to press directions followed by circle, and then you can modify that trick by pressing extra directions followed by triangle. There's a good amount of depth to the trick in the modifier system. Like, it's sort of like a mix of the Activision 02 and the EA Sports Big and the AKA Acclaim setups all mashed together. But this is also another FMX game where you can just do random ass bunny hops, and I have to ask, for anybody that rides in the audience, have you ever seen somebody just bunny hop a 450? Genuinely curious. Like, those bikes are heavy shit, they're no joke. Back on topic, this game also has one more major similarity to Crusty Demons: the physics engine. You can flip, roll, rotate, do crazy shit, and it's all very dynamic, and it's based on your strength stat. I love systems like this because letting the player get more creative builds this layer of replayability. It gives the player a reason to want to try new and unusual things. Speaking of unusual things, this game straight up has a grind button. Pressing triangle while riding on a thin edge will send you into rail balance mode. It's very weird, but it does mean you can do much bigger combos like rail to manual to air and stuff. This is another really good example of very unique tech fantasy game. They're all so different, but the ideas aren't. The differences are all in how those ideas are executed. That makes me think of the Atari 2600. Developers had to make unique games based entirely on a single button and a joystick. Tons of different games found unique ways to make use of that severe limitation. Tech fantasy games are the same way. There are only so many available ideas for the genre as a whole, and the developers always found the most creative ways to make use of those ideas. It isn't always sugar and rainbows, but they put a tremendous amount of effort into just making good games. And this is definitely a good game. The gameplay is solid and the difficulty is never too overpowering, so it just feels comfortable. Visually, this game doesn't look good, but that's okay. I started this video with a quote that applies to this game perfectly. Who cares if you have the latest volumetric isometric photon traces if the game sucks. I don't care about the NPCs enough to care about their visuals, and I only care about the world visuals enough to give me the sandbox with which to play the game. With a game like this, the gameplay is king, and I can forgive some questionably low polygon models or weirdly mapped textures. The character models look fine for the riders, and the bikes look fine, despite some odd scaling choices. It has classic PS2 era graphics trickery charm, and also classic PS2 era graphics insanity. Sometimes things break, and the physics engine isn't exactly the most impressive thing ever. It's also been decimated a little bit more because of the differences between the emulated PCSX2 Emotion Engine and the PS2 Emotion Engine. If you don't know what that is, I'll try to give you a good explanation, but don't take my word for this 100%. The Emotion Engine is the PS2 CPU. It was also used in the first PS3 models for backward compatibility. CPU is kind of a misnomer here, because it was a little bit more than a CPU. It only had one central processing core, but it had two vector processing units and a floating point unit. All of this various processing junk was packed together into a single die, which is where the biggest difference is between PCSX2 and a real PS2. PCSX2 has a special vector handling unit that's separated from the main Emotion Engine emulator, and it's not exactly the same as the two vector units in the real deal. It creates a lot of weird physics inaccuracies, so games with float-based physics like ragdolls and stuff are generally jankier with PCSX2. If you've ever noticed that happening but you didn't know why, now you know. Aside from that, the actual map designs and layouts are great. It's all really big with a lot of objects, and it looks alive. There are some weird collision bugs every now and again. Not every map design choice is perfect, but there is a really good variety, and it's well built enough to be just above average. The soundtrack is definitely a soundtrack in that there is a list of music that plays over the game. It's a mix of classic metal, 80s hair metal, and honestly, it just feels very generic. Like, I don't hate the bands and I don't hate the songs, it just doesn't have the charm that comes with using more underground music, and it doesn't hit the theme as well as other FMX games do. It's also really short. Like, it's good that it actually has a soundtrack, but really, how many times can the song Kickstart My Heart be played in movies and games? Don't quote me on this, but I'm almost positive that song was also used in Gran Turismo 3 and one of the GTA games around the exact same time. I think I've heard it enough to do a dramatic reading without actually having to read it. Finally, this game keeps up the tradition of having a real-world FMX footage archive, and it's there to inspire you to go out and ride. I always do a life is too short thing in this section, and I do mean that. You should go do the things that you love to do, but also, if you've already done the thing that you love, don't forget about the rest of the life that you have to live. There's a ton of stuff out there, whether it's sports, gaming, writing code, making a movie, writing a song, acting in a play, hiking through mountains, sailing over the ocean, flying. Life has so many amazing things, so remember to go out and take advantage of those things once in a while. Or if your example of an amazing thing is just sitting around all the time, then hey, who am I to tell you not to do that? With all of that out of the way, I'll go ahead and give Freestyle MetalX for the PS2 a rating of 7 out of 10. I don't think it's one of the best games I've ever played, and it definitely doesn't really do anything I haven't seen before. But it led the way for a few later games to build on some of its own ideas, and it did a great job being a tech fantasy game, and that's really all I was looking for. There's a lot to love about tech fantasy games. Games exactly like this. They're usually insanely fun even when they aren't that good. You can pick them up fast, put them down fast, pick them up at any time. The gameplay is always solid. This one isn't perfect, but it's a great addition to my personal experiences, and I'm glad that I played it. I just really wish I had more to say about it. Maybe if I had played this before Crusty Demons or Freestyle or even MTX Mototracks, I probably would have more to say, but it is what it is. Now that I'm done with all of that, I think it's finally time to take a look at the SSX series. I get a lot of requests for a variety of snowboarding games, and I'm always a fan of board sports. There are a few I've been meaning to talk about myself, so now is as good a time as any to get to it. I'm really looking forward to it because SSX is one of those series where I have pre-exposure, but it isn't the pre-exposure that most people had. Should be fun. Until next time, thank you, and have a nice day.